Hi guys, welcome back. In the last class, we discussed about Swagger. So in the distributed applications, two actors will be available. One is called as a provider, another one is called as consumer. Provider will be developed by one company and consumer will be developed by another company. If consumer want to access the provider, consumer should know the details of the provider. That's where documentation comes into picture. Now you see IRCTC application developed by one company, and in the IRCTC there is some functionality. Make My Trip application want to access IRCTC functionality. Make My Trip people should develop the logic to access the IRCTC. That is called client logic, client application development. In order to access the client, in order to access one REST API, in order to access one application from the another application, client-side development team needs the details of the REST API. What details they need? What is the endpoint URL? What is the request method? What is the input? What is the output? What are the media types available? What input data they need to send? What output data they will get? All that information is required for the client-side team. So provider side team should provide that information to the client side team. To provide that information, we are going to use a concept called Swagger. Swagger documentation will be available. Provider will give the Swagger documentation to the client, and the client will develop the logic based on the documentation to access the REST API. Okay, so in the last class, we developed one REST API to book the train tickets, and we generated the documentation for that, and we are able to access the documentation also by using Swagger, and by using Swagger UI, we are able to test our REST API also. Okay, now today we are going to see other part of the movie. So as of now we understood what is distributed application. We understood what is distributed application, distributed technologies. So what are the technologies are available to develop the distributed application? And we discussed what is interoperability. What is interoperability? Irrespective of the platform, irrespective of the language, if two applications are communicating, then they are called as interoperable applications. Then next one, here we understood what is HTTP protocol. What is HTTP protocol? HTTP request packet, HTTP response packet, HTTP request packet, HTTP response packet, HTTP methods available, get method, post, put, delete methods. And we discussed about HTTP status codes. So what is 200, 201, like this. We discussed about HTTP status codes and status messages. After that, we understood what is XML and JXB API. XML is used to transfer the data from one application to another application. XML is platform independent and language independent. To convert XML data to the object data to the XML, we are going to use a concept called JAX-B API that is provided by Sun Microsystems. Nowadays, instead of XML, people are going for JSON. To work with the JSON, we are having an API called Jackson API. Jackson API and JSON API is also available. By using these Jackson and JSON APIs, we can convert Java object to JSON and JSON to Java object. Then we understood REST API development, how to create our first REST API. REST API development we understood, and we discussed REST API testing with the Postman. REST API testing with the Postman. Postman is one of the open source software which is used to test the functionality of the REST API. In the REST APIs, user interface will not be available. Okay guys, in the REST API, user interface will not be available. REST APIs are pure business to business communication. So in order to test our REST API, we are using Postman. Then after, we understood media types. In the REST API, we understood media types, consumes and produces. Consumes will represent in which format REST API can take the input. Producers will represent in which format API can provide the response. Then we discussed about what is content type header and accept header. What is content type and accept headers? When a client is sending a request to the REST API, client will send the data in which format will be represented by content type. When client is sending request, client is sending the data in which format, client is expecting the data in the which format, that will be represented by accept headers. Content type and accept are the headers will be available. So REST API development, for that we are using @REST controller annotation. @REST controller annotation we are using for the REST API development. REST API testing with the Postman and media types are available. Content type and accept headers are available. And we have seen Swagger documentation for the REST API. So when we are developing REST API in one company, that REST API should be accessed by another company. If one REST API should be accessed by another company project, they should know the documentation of the API. So to provide the documentation of the API, we are going to use endpoint URL request method. All that information should be known to the client-side development team. To know this all information, client-side development team will get the documentation from the provider. Based on the provider documentation, they can develop the client logic. And along with this, we have seen what is request parameter. How to read the data from the URL. Okay. To read the data from the URL, we will use request param. And we have seen what is path variable. Path variable. To read the data from the path parameters, we will go for path variable. And we have seen annotation @request body. Okay. So now, when the client is sending the request to the REST API URL, if a client wants to send some data in the query, then that will be sent in the query parameter. Okay, these are called as request parameter. To read the query parameters from the URL, we are going to use @request param annotation. To read the path variable from the URL, we will go for @path variable. So ticket ID, we are sending in the URL. How the REST API will read the data from the URL? If it is a path parameter, it will read by using path variable. Now, suppose client is sending a post request with the data in the request body. If a client is sending post request with the data in the request body, to read the data in the method, we are going to use @request body annotation. @request body annotation. And we have seen what is response entity class. What is the response entity? It is used to combine response body plus HTTP status code. Whatever the response that client want to send to the, whatever the response that server want to send to the client, that response we can send by using response entity. Here, the client application will send the passenger data in the request body. To take the data from the request body, we are using @request body annotation. If we want to send the request with some data in the URL, path variable, any data that is coming in the URL, to read the data. After ticket ID will come. To take the ticket ID from the URL, we are using path variable annotation. Okay, guys. So these are the things that we have discussed in our REST API development as of now. So with this knowledge, we can develop only one side of the project. That is nothing but, with this knowledge, we can develop provider application. Are you guys getting my point? With this knowledge, what we have developed now? With this knowledge, we have developed provider. Provider development we have completed. Provider means the application which is providing the services to other application is called as a provider application. Provider we have tested by using Postman. Provider documentation we have generated by using Swagger. Now guys, my ticket application is available here. My ticket application is available here. Instead of the random, let me take some ticket ID here as some 100. When the ticket booking is completed, guys, I am going to increment the ticket ID just for our testing purpose. Just for our testing purpose, I'm taking the ticket ID outside of this class and I am incrementing this. Okay, instead of the random value. Integer ticket ID I'm taking, the ticket ID I'm setting as 100. After that, I'm incrementing. So in general, in the real time, that ID will be generated on the database side and that ID will be used. Here I'm setting ID as 100. Then when the next ticket comes, that ID will be incremented. Okay, guys, just it is my application. Now, currently, can you tell me where is my application running, guys? Currently, where is my project running? My project is running in the local system. Currently, my project is running in the local system. Can you guys access my project if it is running in my local system? Can you guys access my project if it is running in the local system? You guys cannot access my project if it is running in the local system. Now, whatever the REST API I developed to book the ticket, that REST API should be available for other company to access. Okay, guys. Now, I will deploy my application in the AWS cloud, guys. Okay. So you don't need to understand what is AWS cloud and all that stuff now, because the DevOps team is going to take care of that part to deploy your application into cloud platform. Now here, I'm going to deploy my application in the AWS cloud, guys. I will deploy my application in the AWS cloud and I will give you one public URL so that everybody can access my application. I will give one public URL so that everybody can access my application. Okay, in the AWS, I will create one Linux machine. Let me go for AWS account and let me create one Linux machine. Launch the instance. I'm taking my Linux VM. It is just to run my Spring Boot application in the Linux machine with the public IP so that everybody can access it. Okay, I'm going for this machine. Let me run this application. Okay, I'm creating this machine, guys. This is AWS cloud. I'm doing this operation just to give you public URL of our REST API so that you can develop the client. You feel that how one project will communicate with the another project. Let me start my machine. Meanwhile, I want to package my application as a jar file. Spring Boot application will be packaged as a jar file. So let me create a jar file for this project. Build is available. Let me go for final name. Let me configure final name as irctc API.jar. So when I package my boot application, this jar file should be created with this name irctc-api.jar. Now let's right click on the project, run as maven build. I want to package this project. For that I'm using clean package goal, apply and run. So that my project will be packaged as a jar file. So to run the Spring Boot application, we need that jar. Using the jar, I will run my application in the Linux machine. Okay. Application packaging in progress. Application package is in progress. Application will be compiled and application will be packaged as a jar file. That jar file I will deploy in the Linux computer, that is in the cloud platform, so that everybody can access my application. I can develop both client and resource in the same project, in the same system, but you will not feel the real time, right? One project I will run in one computer, another project I will run in another computer. This API will execute in the Linux computer and this client application will execute in my computer. From my computer, one application will communicate with the another application running in the another computer. That is called distributed application. Now, check this. Still, the project packaging is in progress. Still, the packaging is in progress. Once the packaging is completed, the jar file will be created. That jar file I will run in the Linux computer. That Linux computer I have created in the AWS cloud platform. Why I am running in the AWS cloud? I will get the public IP so that everybody can access my API. Okay, currently I am giving it for everyone. In future, I will tell you how to add the security for that. So today I want every student in this batch should access my API documentation. That's why I'm giving for public access. In the real time, we will implement security for that. You got the clarity, guys? I want you people to access my API. I want you people to develop the client for my API. For that reason, I am giving this in the public platform. Now my build got success. Go to the project. Go to the project, refresh this project. When I refresh this project, can you see the target? Can you check it? IRCTC API jar file is created. Okay, we should not give the name jar, guys. We should give the name as only IRCTC API. It will package as a jar. Final name, whatever you give the final name, with that name jar will be created. Let me execute the goal once again. Run as Maven build. I want to repackage my project with the name as IRCTC-API. That's it. Yeah, this time it will happen fast. Project packaging is in progress. Yeah, build success. Now, my Spring Boot application is packaged as a jar file. Now you see irctc-api.jar file is available. Now guys, I have packaged my application as a jar file. Let us see. What I am trying to do today is, I have my Spring Boot application. That Spring Boot application I have packaged as a jar file. irctc-api.jar is created. So where is this jar available? My laptop. In my laptop, this jar file is available. I can run this jar file in my system, and with the local host I can access. But I want this API to be available for all our batch people. So if I run this project in my local system, you people cannot access that. If I run this project in my local system, you people cannot access that. This application should be available for the public. So for that, what I am doing is, guys, so here I'm creating one Linux machine in the AWS cloud. So I'm using AWS cloud platform. In the AWS cloud platform, I have taken one Linux computer. In the AWS cloud platform, I have taken one Linux machine, Linux computer, Linux virtual machine. I'm creating that Linux virtual machine in the AWS cloud platform. Now, I am having my Windows laptop and jar file is available in my Windows. From this Windows, I need to connect to the Linux machine. I need to upload my jar file to the Linux machine. I need to run the project in the Linux machine. Okay, here I'm using one software called MobiExtrum. Here I will use one software called MobiExtrum. MobiExtrum software I'm using to connect from my Windows computer to this Linux computer. Okay, so I have MobiExtrum. From my laptop, I will connect it to the MobiExtrum. From the MobiExtrum, I will connect it to the Linux computer. So whatever the jar file is available, that IRCTC jar, I will upload here. Application jar, whatever the IRCTC jar is available, IRCTC jar file, upload in the Linux computer, run the jar file in the Linux machine. So whatever the jar file I have, run app jar here. Run the application jar file in the Linux computer. What is the advantage if I run my jar file in the Linux computer? This Linux computer will have a public IP address everybody can access. This is a public IP address available for the Linux machine. Everybody can access my Linux machine now. In that Linux machine, my IRCTC application will run. Okay, my Linux machine is started. Let me show you how to deploy my Spring Boot application in the Linux machine. Take this public IP, go to MobiExtrum. MobiExtrum is a software I'm using as a mediator to connect from the Windows to Linux machine. I will go to MobiExtrum. In this MobiExtrum, click on the session, remote host. This Linux machine username is EC2 user. I created a private key. I will upload the private key to connect to the Linux machine. Okay, I'm in the Linux machine now. In this Linux machine, currently nothing is available. Let me refresh it. I don't have anything in the Linux machine. If you guys observe here, there is a upload option available. I will click on this upload. I will select the jar file available in my computer. The jar which is available in my computer, I will upload to the Linux computer which is created in the AWS cloud platform. Now, my project jar file is available in the workspace. IRCTC eRail API available. In the target folder, IRCTC jar file is available. Take this path and click on this upload option and go to that path, select the jar file. That jar file I'm uploading to my Linux machine. From my Windows machine, application jar file is uploaded to Linux machine. So you refresh, IRCTC API jar file is available. In the Linux, you can check that IRCTC-API.jar file is available. Do you know how to run this jar file? Do you know how to run the jar file? Guys, come on. Do you know how to run the jar file? You don't know how to run the jar file? Java space -jar space jar file. Now, I'm trying to run the jar file in the Linux computer. When I'm running my jar file in the Linux computer, what it is saying? Boss, in your computer, Java software is not installed. In your computer, Java software is not installed. Guys, tell me where I developed my project and where I am trying to run my project. Where I developed my project, where I am trying to run my project. Guys, are you getting my point? If I developed my project in the Windows machine, but I'm trying to run that in the Linux machine. So if I run my project in the Windows machine, what is the problem? Only I can access in the browser by using localhost. You cannot access. Now I want everybody to access my API. That's why I'm going for AWS cloud. I created a Linux machine. I uploaded my jar file from my Windows machine to Linux machine. Which software I'm using to upload the jar file from Windows to Linux? Which jar file, which software I'm using to upload the jar? Mobile Extra. Some people will use Docker. Where is the Docker, man? Rohan, where is the Docker here? Do we have the Docker here or we don't have the Docker here? We don't have Docker. I have done the development in my Windows computer. I tested my project in the Windows computer. When I run my project in my local computer, only I can access my project. That is local. Now, I want my API to be available for public. Everybody should be able to access my API. So that's why whatever the jar is available for my project, that jar file I uploaded in the AWS Cloud Linux machine by using Mobile Extra. Now, I want to run the jar file in the Linux machine. To run the jar file in the Linux machine, Java software is required. So currently, in this Linux machine, Java software is available or Java software is not available? Not available. So I need to install the Java in the Linux. Sudo yum install Java. Guys, remember, for Java developers, Linux is also important. So I think 3-4 months back, I conducted a free batch on the Linux for the Java developers. I uploaded those videos also in our YouTube. 9 classes I have taken for the Linux. So those Linux videos also very, very important. If you go to the playlist, you can see my Linux playlist. I have taken Linux classes. See here, total 11 videos available. Learn the Linux in the simple way. What is Linux? How to create account in the AWS? How to create a Linux computer in the AWS? How to install the Java? How to run the jar file? All these things I have explained in these Linux classes. One free batch I conducted for the Linux. So almost 11 classes I have taken. Here I have given the videos. How to launch EC2 instance in the AWS. How to connect to the EC2 instance. These are the important videos. Okay, guys. So if anybody having free time, if you want to learn the Linux, please go through these videos. These videos will give you clarity on the Linux. Because I'm not saying that, man, that is coming as suggestion to me. Okay, fine, good. See here, I'm using sudo yum install Java. So when I execute this, what will happen? In this Linux machine, Java software will be installed. I'm installing Java in the Linux. Okay. Java is getting installed. What is yum in the Linux? You will understand if you attend the Linux class assessment. Today, I'm not here to teach you Linux. I want to show you my API public access. That's it. Okay. Now let me go for Java version. So OpenJDK Java 17 version is installed in my Linux machine. Okay, guys. So when I execute this sudo yum install Java, this command, which version of the Linux is installed? Which version of the Java is installed? Latest version of the Java is installed. Latest stable version of the Java got installed. Okay. OpenJDK 17 version got installed. Now I have my jar file. Let me run it. Java space -jar space irctc API dot jar. Now I'm running my REST API in the Linux machine. You see our Spring Boot banner is printing. Our application logs are printing. Now, so Spring Boot will have Tomcat as an embedded server. Started the application 11 seconds ago. So it started on the Tomcat server with the port number 8080, right? Now, let me give the public URL of my application. Now my application running in the cloud platform. Let me give the public URL of my application that you can also access. Public IP :8080 /swagger-ui.html. Now, swagger-ui.html, Swagger documentation I'm trying to access. I think it is not loaded properly. So let me localhost :8080 /swagger-ui.html. Why this Swagger is not loading? Yeah, so this application is running in the AWS cloud, that is running in the Linux machine. Now I'm trying to access my Swagger v2/API docs. Now see, this documentation is opening in the browser. Can you guys hit this URL now? Are you guys able to access my project documentation, JSON documentation? Is it available now? Can you click on that URL? Can you click on that URL? Is it available for you people now? So now this application is running in my local machine, or my application running in the AWS cloud machine? Application running in the local machine or application running in the AWS cloud machine? My application running in the AWS cloud machine. What is the benefit with this? What is the benefit with this? What is the benefit with this, guys? What is the benefit with this? Everybody can access. Now my application is public. Anybody can access my REST API. So are you clear with this? The REST API running in the cloud machine, in the cloud. Now, client applications will be available. Client applications can access my API, or client applications cannot access my API. My API, IRCTC API running in the AWS cloud. So here, make my trip want to access, make my trip want to act as client. Yatra want to act as a client. Go IBB want to act as a client. Now, these people should access my API. Now, so here IRCTC project is developed by one company, and that company deployed that project in the AWS cloud. So now it is available for the public. It is available for the public. Now, make my trip want to access IRCTC application, which is running in the Linux machine. Yatra want to access this application, and Go IBB want to access this application. So now can I call these applications as client applications? Can I call these applications as client applications now? So for one API, can we have multiple clients? For one API, can we have multiple clients now? Yes or no? Now, what is required? What is required? What is required for the clients to access my API? What is required for the clients to access my API, guys? What is required for the clients to access my API? Come on, API details are available. So how we are providing the API details for them? How we are providing API details for them? Swagger. I think guys, Swagger UI is not loading here. I think there is some issue with that. Swagger UI is not loading for me, but the JSON documentation is loading for me. JSON documentation is loading for me. Swagger UI is not loading for me. For somebody, it is loading. Parmesh, is it loading for you? Guys, are you able to access this Swagger UI also? Wow, it is loading. Yes, it is working for me. With the slash, it is not loading. Without the slash, it is loading. Yes, this is my link. So this is my API documentation, which is available for my REST API. Now you can go to this. You can go for the ticket. You can book the ticket and you can get the ticket. So now, are you able to access my API documentation, which is available in the AWS cloud? With this documentation, can you guys understand what is there in my API now? With this documentation, can you guys understand what is there in my API now? So, do you have all the required information about my API to access that? Do you have all the required information of my API to access it? So, to whom I will give my API documentation? To whom I will give my API documentation? For the client people. Okay, now we want to understand, we need to understand how to develop the clients to access the REST API. So now I will close my IDE. Now IDE is not required for me because my API is already available in the public platform. Anybody can access my REST API. So as of now, guys, from the last 10-15 days, what we understood? We understood the complete provider and consumer, or we understood only provider development? From the last 10-15 days, we understood only provider development. Now, where is my provider? Now, where is my provider? My provider is available in the cloud platform. Is it available? Provider running in the local system or provider running in the cloud platform today? My provider is hosted on the cloud platform. My provider is hosted on the cloud platform. Now anybody can access my provider. If you give me the passenger data as an input, I will give you ticket data as an output. To make my trip, want to book a train ticket, make my trip will take the data from the passenger. Make my trip will send passenger data to the IRCTC. IRCTC will book the ticket. IRCTC will send the ticket to the make my trip. Yatra will send passenger data to IRCTC. IRCTC will book the ticket. IRCTC will give the ticket to the Yatra. Now GoIBIBO will send the request to the IRCTC with the passenger data. IRCTC will book the ticket, will give it to the GoIBIBO. So now I want to develop a REST client. Using that REST client, I want to access the REST API. One project should access another project. Then they are called as distributed application. So guys, now we have seen REST API hosting in the AWS cloud. REST API hosting in AWS cloud. REST API deployment, I can say REST API deployment in the AWS cloud. So what I have done here today, I created one Linux machine in the AWS cloud. I connected to that Linux machine by using MobileXtram, and I have uploaded my jar file into the Linux machine. I installed Java in the Linux machine and I executed my jar file in the Linux machine. With that, public access is available for my Linux machine. That means you can access my REST API documentation. You know that in my REST API, there are two methods available. One is binded to post request. Another one is binded to get request. Are you guys able to understand? Now, client development. Today, we need to talk about REST client development. We need to understand REST client development. Before going for REST client development, do you guys have any questions? Don't ask me about AWS cloud, Linux and all. That is not required for us. Okay. So just for our accessibility, I have uploaded. If you still want to learn how to create AWS account, and sir, you are using a Linux machine in the AWS cloud, do you need to pay any money? For 1 year, AWS account is free. This machine is T2 micro. 1 year it is free. So AWS will not charge anything for first year. After 1 year completed, then the bill will be generated. So whatever the AWS cloud account I am using, it is a free tier account. First 1 year free of cost. Whatever the Linux machine I am using, that is also free of cost. So no charges will be available. So if you guys want to know more about that AWS account creation and how to deploy the Spring Boot application, already I uploaded video in the YouTube. How to create the EC2 instance in the AWS, how to deploy Spring Boot application in the AWS, just same process. Today I have done in the live class also. I packaged my application as a jar file. I created a Linux machine in the AWS. I connected to that Linux machine by using Mobile Extra. I uploaded the jar file from my Windows to Linux machine. I installed Java in the Linux and I executed my jar file. Then application is running in the Linux machine in the AWS cloud. That application I'm accessing by using AWS Linux machine public IP. Spring Boot application will run on the Tomcat server with port number 8080. So that is what we are accessing. Public IP of the Linux machine :8080 swagger-ui.html. Swagger documentation we are accessing. Now you can test this application from the Postman also with this URL. Got my point? So with this, can I say my REST API is running in the AWS cloud? With this, can I say my REST API is running in the AWS cloud? Yes. So before going to develop REST client, who is REST API? One application who is providing the services to other application, that is called as a REST API. So now IRCTC application running in the AWS cloud. So that is called as provider, service provider. Any application who want to book the train ticket, IRCTC providing service for them. Make My Trip want to book a train ticket. Make My Trip should act as a client. IRCTC acting as a provider. Make My Trip will send the request to IRCTC with the passenger data. IRCTC will book the ticket and will send the ticket data to the Make My Trip. Now my provider is completed, development completed. My provider running in the cloud. Anybody who want to access my provider, they should know about my provider. To know about my provider, I have given the documentation for my provider by using Swagger. So anybody who want to do business dealing with me, who want to book the train tickets by using my IRCTC API, for them, I will give my documentation. By using my documentation, they can understand what operations are available in my API. What is the request method? What is the input? What is the output? What input data? What output data? I will support from my API. Everything they can access with my documentation. Okay. Now, anybody having a question? You can ask your questions before understanding the client development. Provider development completed. Provider deployed into the cloud platform. I have given the URL of the provider. You can access my provider. Documentation is also available. Anybody having any questions, you can ask me.
Sir, Spring Cloud and AWS Cloud are both are different.
Sorry?
Spring Cloud and AWS Cloud.
Yeah, they are different, sir. Spring Cloud is different. AWS Cloud is different. AWS Cloud will provide you infrastructure to run your applications. Spring Cloud is used to manage our microservices related configurations. Once this REST API is completed, we will go for microservices with the Spring Cloud. Okay.
Sir, in REST client application also will deploy into the AWS, right? How it will connect to that application, sir? Provider application.
Which one?
We are developing REST client, right?
Client development, I have not done that. Once I done the development of client, then you will understand how it will connect to the cloud application. Okay. So do you have any questions up to this process?
Hello, sir.
Sir.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. MOBA Extreme is why we are using, sir, MOBA Extreme?
If you see the diagram, what you are understanding?
To view the
To connect
See-
from the Windows computer to Linux computer, we are using MOBA Extra. Some people will use Putty also.
sir, what?
It is the interface to talk with the server.
It is interface to communicate with the Linux machine, man.
Okay.
So my jar file is available in the Windows machine. I want to run in the Linux machine in the AWS cloud. To send the jar file from my Windows to Linux, I'm using MOBA Extra.
Any FTP client.
Yeah, hello, sir. Okay, UI representation. Huh?
Guys, please raise your hand. Everybody speaking at a time. I'm not able to hear. Could you please raise your hand in the Zoom? Who want to ask a doubt? I will give the permission to speak. Yeah, Suman, unmute your mic and tell me what's your question.
Yes, sir. Actually, I have joined in this class. This is yesterday. This Saturday, day before yesterday.
Okay.
So yeah, actually, I am unable to get the backup video.
Yeah, please talk to admin team, sir. They will give you that.
Yeah, so they told me. So you talk to Ashok sir. They will provide the backup videos.
So send me an email, sir. I will talk to you regarding that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Mohanta, what is your question?
Sir, we need to, sir, record for practice now. AWS set off.
No need of that, sir. No need of that. I will give the my URL, right? You don't need to set up the AWS because you will deviate from the Spring Boot. So it's not required to do. If you have idea on the AWS cloud, you can do it. If you are new to the AWS, right, leave it. You will access my API. I will give the URL of my API for client development.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. If you know the AWS and Linux, you can do it. If you don't know, it will take time to understand. Okay?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Ganesh, what is your question?
Yeah, hello, sir.
Hello,
To
Ganesh.
secure, yeah, it's audible, sir.
Security, I have not explained that, sir. I
Yeah.
have not explained the security. We will discuss in the coming classes.
Yeah, simple. Just I have one question, sir. To secure our URL by adding simply Spring security dependence in pom.xml is sufficient, sir?
That is very basic security. That is called basic authentication, but that is not sufficient. We need to go for JWT tokens and all that stuff.
Okay, sir. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Taniga, what is your question? Hello, Taniga, what is your doubt? Yeah, I think Satya Naik, what is your question?
Sir, if we develop the API using those softwares, and those are having some different versions from the softwares in our cloud machine. So will that be an issue or not?
If the versions are not matching, that will become an issue. You need to take care of it. So that's where, to avoid all these problems, people are going for Docker. By using Docker, we can overcome the version problems. Okay. So that is the responsibility of the DevOps team to deploy your applications to the cloud platforms and all. So developers will not do that. Developer will write the code and will share the code in the GitHub. DevOps operations team will be available. They will take care of your application deployment. Okay. Yeah. Tanigai, what is your question? Tanigai and Kailash.
Hi, sir. Good evening. And I have one doubt. See, normally for development purpose, we'll be having separate profile-based Swagger URL, right, sir?
Right.
Okay, because it is having the test also. We can do the testing also, right? So it's not affected.
Generally, in the real time, what will happen is they will give application which is a non-prod environment and prod environment. So when the Make My Trip people are developing the logic to access IRCTC, directly they can't access the prod URL. They will get the non-prod URL. Once their development and testing is completed, then IRCTC people will give the prod URL for the Make My Trip. So two URLs will be available, prod URL, non-prod URL. Non-prod URL will be used for testing purpose, production URL for the live environment.
Okay, sir. And one more question, like, can you please explain about API versioning?
API versioning means, so I have deployed IRCTC application now to book the train tickets. This is API 1.0. Later in this IRCTC application, I'm adding the functionality for the hotel booking also. That will become API 2.0. So whenever we add the new functionality, we will give you a new version for the API.
That version details where we will be mentioning, like, for example, yesterday I developed something.
They will give the documentation. Yeah, documentation will be given. So when the company is changing the API, company will send the API changes to the clients. Through email, they will give the information. New functionality available like that.
So URL will be V1, V2 separate.
V1, V2 URLs will be provided to them.
As a provider, we need to, deploy multiple endpoints for that.
Yes, we will deploy that. We have to do it.
Okay. And one more small doubt, we don't need any embedded server for if I'm applying on any cloud environment, because it's having its own server, right?
Yeah, no, here in my Linux machine, did I install the server or I installed only Java?
No, you install only Java and it is running on embedded. For example, some application in Azure and in my project, they will be deploying in.
That is that they will install the server and they will deploy. That is the DevOps people headache. It's not for the developer. Who will take care of the deployments in the project?
DevOps.
Those people will install the required softwares. Those people will install the required servers. They will deploy that. Okay.
Yeah. In that case, we can exclude the embedded server, sir, for performance.
Yes, you can exclude it. I will show you how to exclude also.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Good, guys. Fine. Perfect. So with this, we are clear with my API running in the cloud. So now for my API, documentation is also available. Other applications who want to access my API, for them, I have given the documentation also. Now REST client development. What is REST client? The application which is accessing another application. The application which is accessing other applications is called as REST client. The application which is accessing other applications is called as REST client. So we can develop in Spring Boot, we can develop REST client. In Spring Boot, we can develop REST client in two ways. Sorry, three ways basically. In Spring Boot, we can develop REST client in three ways. One is by using REST template class. Second one is by using web client interface. And third one is by using free and client interface. This free and client interface we are going to discuss in the Spring Cloud. So as of now, we are going to deal with a REST template class and web client interface. It is introduced in Spring 5.x version. Okay, guys. So this REST template available from Spring 3.0. So as of now, whatever the REST API is available, for that REST API, we are sending the request from the postman and we are testing that. But now I want to establish communication from one application to another application. To establish the communication from one application to another application, we need to develop the client logic. Now I want to develop a Make My Trip application. In the Make My Trip application, I should write the client logic. How many ways are there to develop the client logic in the Make My Trip? To develop that client logic, we have three options. First of all, what is a client? The application which is accessing other applications is called as REST client. In Spring Boot, we can develop REST client in three ways. One is by using REST template approach. Second one is by using web client approach. Third one is by using free and client approach. PN client approach we are going to use in the Spring Cloud. REST template, it supports for only synchronous communication. Okay. Web client supports synchronous plus asynchronous. Synchronous plus asynchronous communication will be supported by web client, whereas REST template will support only for synchronous communication. What is synchronous? What is asynchronous? That we need to understand. Now, for example, let us take a scenario. I have one application. My application should access two other applications, two other REST APIs. So now here, API 1 will be available, and here API 2 is available. So this is my client application. This client application should access API 1 and API 2. So here, call API 1. Okay. Here, call API 2. Call API 1 and call API 2. So there are two applications I want to access. Now, call API 1 and call API 2. My client application want to access two other applications. Now here, if this client application send a request to the first API and wait for the response. Once we receive the response from the first API, then continue and send a request for the second API. After making a request, if you are waiting for the response, then it is called as synchronous communication. So now here, when you go for client development, REST template is a class available. By using REST template class, we can send a request from one application to another application. So this REST API is developed by one company. This REST API is developed by another company. Now I am developing the client application. In this client application, I want to access API 1 and I want to access API 2. So after sending a request for the API 1, if your thread is blocked until you get the response from the API 1, then that is called synchronous communication. If you are using REST template, so if you use REST template to send the request for the first API, REST template will block your thread. It will wait till you get the response from the first API, then it will continue and it will send the request for the second API. That is called blocking approach. We can say synchronous approach. That is called as a synchronous approach. But when you go for web client concept, what is there? If you want, you can go for synchronous, and if you want, you can go for asynchronous also. What is the meaning of asynchronous? If I use web client, after sending a request for the first API, it will not wait for the response. It will continue the execution. Immediately, it will make the request for the second API. If you want to wait, then you need to go for synchronous. If you don't want to wait, then you can go for asynchronous. So here, if you go for REST template, you can send the request from one application to another application in the synchronous communication. Okay. If you go for web client will support for both synchronous communication as well as asynchronous communication also. Sir, which one is recommended? Synchronous communication is recommended or asynchronous communication is recommended in the project development? Synchronous communication is recommended or asynchronous communication is recommended in the project? You cannot come to the conclusion. It depends upon the requirement. Whether we need to go for synchronous or asynchronous, it depends upon the requirement. Now let us take this scenario. Here guys, I have a client application. My client application will send the city name as an input for the first API. First API will send the zip code of that city. My client application will send the city as an input. It will return the zip code as an output. City is the input for the first API. Zip code is the output of the first API. Now, what it will do? Whatever the zip code I got, I will send the zip code for the second API and I will get the temperature based on the zip code. Now, in this scenario, synchronous communication or asynchronous communication is required. I need the zip code for my city. I don't know the zip code of that particular city. I know the city name. That city name I will give to the first API. So should I wait for the zip code, or without zip code, can I send the request for the second API? So in this scenario, asynchronous is required or synchronous is required? Synchronous is required. What my point? My application is having a city name. City name I will give to the first API. Based on the city name, first API will give me the zip code. That zip code I will give to the second API. Based on the zip code, second API will give me temperature data. So after sending a request for the first API, if I don't wait, where is the zip code? How can I send the request for the second API? In this scenario, I should go for synchronous communication. Synchronous communication. In this scenario, synchronous communication is required. My client application will send the request to first API with the city name. That first API will give the zip code for the client application. Client application will send the zip code to the second API. Second API will give the temperature. I should go for synchronous. Now, let me go for another scenario. So there are two APIs available. My client application want to access the two APIs. My client application want to access the two APIs. This time it is not the zip code and the city. This time it is not the zip code and city. Okay. Now here, my first application, my client will send PAN card number to the API 1. Based on the PAN card number, it should provide me tax details. Okay. Now I will send Aadhaar card details to the second API. I need address details of the person. Is there any relation between the first API response and second API request? My client application will send the request for the first API with the PAN card number. First API will give the tax information based on the PAN card number. I will send a second request with the Aadhaar card number. It should give me the address based on the Aadhaar card number. So after sending the request for the first API, should I wait for the response, or I can send the request for the second API directly? So in this scenario, synchronous is required or asynchronous is required? Asynchronous communication. Are you guys getting my point? So now tell me, synchronous is recommended or asynchronous is recommended in the project? Synchronous is recommended or asynchronous is recommended in the project? It depends on the requirement. You cannot come to the conclusion asynchronous is required. Asynchronous is recommended. You cannot come to the conclusion synchronous is recommended. It depends upon the situation. It depends upon our business requirement, whether we need to go for synchronous communication or asynchronous communication. Are you guys able to follow me? Now tell me, what is REST client? Why we need REST client? What is REST client and why we need REST client? The application which is accessing other applications is called as REST client. In Spring Boot, we can develop REST client in 3 ways. One is by using REST template. Second one is by using web client. REST template supports only synchronous communication. Web client will support both synchronous and asynchronous. When this web client is introduced in the Spring 5.x version, and we have a third approach, PN client. PN client we can use in the Spring Cloud. What is the difference between REST template and web client? REST template supports only synchronous communication. Web client supports both synchronous and asynchronous. Now tell me, out of REST template and web client, which one is recommended to use in the project now? REST template is recommended or web client is recommended? REST template is recommended or web client is recommended? Web client is recommended. Why web client is recommended? Whatever is available in the REST template, same thing available in the web client also. Web client will support for both synchronous communication as well as asynchronous communication. Let us go for official documentation of the Spring REST template. Let us go for Spring official documentation. Let us see what Spring people are telling. REST template, a predefined class in the Spring. Okay. Now, let us read this documentation, guys. This is public class REST template. Can you guys read this? Synchronous client to perform HTTP request. When One application want to access another application by using HTTP request, then you can go for the REST template class. REST template is a synchronous client to perform HTTP request. REST template is typically used as a shared component. As of 5.0, this class is in the maintenance mode with only minor request for changes and bugs to be accepted going forward. Please consider using the web client, which has a modern API support to sync, async and streaming scenarios. So this is my statement, or this is official Spring documentation statement. Is this my statement or it is official Spring documentation statement? It is official statement. So out of the REST template and web client, which one they are telling to use? Boss, in the Spring 5.0, web client is introduced. You better to go for web client instead of REST template. REST template is in the maintenance mode. In future versions of the Spring, REST template may not be available. If you want to develop the REST clients, you go for web client, which is a modern API. It supports both sync and asynchronous scenarios. REST template supports only synchronous scenario. REST template introduced in the 3.0. Web client is introduced in the 5.0. Okay, now you understand what is synchronous communication and asynchronous communication. So what is the meaning of synchronous communication and asynchronous communication? Here, wait. Here, wait. Here, wait. Here, no waiting. No waiting. After making the first request, if your thread is waiting for the second request, that is called synchronous. After making the request, if you are not waiting, then it is called as asynchronous communication. Now, REST template, synchronous client. Web client, synchronous and asynchronous client. Web client introduced in the Spring 5.x version. Are you guys able to follow me? Are you guys able to follow me? Now you understand the difference between what is provider and consumer. Provider will give the services to other applications. Consumer will access the services from the application. Now, IRCTC is a provider which is running in the cloud. The documentation also available. Now I want to develop the Make My Trip application. By using Make My Trip application, I will send the request to the IRCTC. Okay, guys. So now what I want to do is, I want to develop Make My Trip application, guys. I want to develop a Make My Trip application. Here, my UI page will be available to book a ticket. Here, my user interface will be available to book a ticket. Okay. User interface will be available to book a ticket. A form will be available. And here, my controller class will be available in the Make My Trip application. Normal controller. I'm taking normal controller. Controller class I am going to develop. So what I want to develop is, I want to develop one HTML page with a user interface, and I want to develop a controller to take the data from the form, and I want to develop a service. Service layer I want to develop in my project. This is a separate project I'm developing, Make My Trip. Now, this service application should access my REST API, IRCTC API. It is running in the AWS cloud. In the AWS cloud, my IRCTC API is available. I have given the URL of the IRCTC API, which is running in the cloud platform. Now, this service application should send a request to IRCTC API with the passenger data. IRCTC API should send a ticket data as a response. Okay, guys. Now, from user interface request will go to controller. From controller request will go to service. So this is my Make My Trip application. This is my Make My Trip application. I want to develop a Make My Trip application. Make My Trip application will contain a user interface. The form will be available to book the ticket. Now, end user will communicate with the Make My Trip user interface. End user will open the UI page in the Make My Trip. End user will fill up the details in the form and he submit book ticket. When you click on book ticket, Make my trip controller will take the data from the form and controller will give the data to the service. Service will call the IRCTC API. Where is the IRCTC API? IRCTC API running in the cloud platform. Make my trip I will run in my system. Now, can I say this is client application which is accessing the provider application? Can I say this is a client application which is accessing the provider application? So IRCTC running in the cloud. Now I need to develop a make my trip. In make my trip application, I should write the logic to access the IRCTC. So how one application can access another application? Now, make my trip application should have the client logic by using REST template or web client. So now when we fill the form data and when we click on book ticket, user will click on book ticket now. Here, front end will be available, book ticket. Book ticket. End user will click on book ticket in the make my trip. So does make my trip really having the logic to book the ticket or make IRCTC having the logic to book the ticket? Where is the logic available to book the ticket? Ticket booking available in the make my trip or ticket booking available in the IRCTC? Ticket booking available in the IRCTC. So can I call IRCTC is a provider? Yes. Where is the provider now? Where is the provider now? Cloud. So make my trip application I will develop in my system. From make my trip I want to access IRCTC. So in the service layer, I need to write the logic by using either REST template or I need to use a web client. REST template and web client, which one is recommended? REST template or web client, which one is recommended? Web client is recommended. REST template will support only synchronous communication. Web client will support synchronous plus asynchronous communication. So now can I say make my trip application acting as a client for IRCTC? Can I say make my trip is acting as a client for IRCTC? Yes or no? Yes, make my trip will act as a client for the IRCTC. Make my trip will act as a client for the IRCTC. Client logic will be available in the service layer. Take request data, take request, send response. That logic will be available in the controller. Front end part is available in the user interface. Book ticket functionality. He is a user, end user, client, user. User want to book a ticket by using make my trip. Make my trip does not have the logic to book the ticket. End user will use make my trip. End user will go to book ticket functionality. So make my trip will take the data from the user, will give the data to controller. Controller will give the data to service. Service will send the passenger data to IRCTC. So this is passenger data. Input, passenger data. What is the response? Response is the ticket data. IRCTC will take the data from end user. IRCTC will give the data to the make my trip will take the data from end user. Make my trip will give the data to the IRCTC. IRCTC will execute the logic and will give the ticket data to the make my trip. So can I call this is B2B communication? Can I call this is B2B communication? Till yesterday, we understood provider development. Today, we are understanding client development. Provider development completed. Provider running in the cloud. Now assume that IRCTC developed by other company. We know the URL of the IRCTC. We have the documentation of the IRCTC. With the documentation of IRCTC, we need to develop make my trip. In the make my trip service layer contains the business logic to communicate with the IRCTC. B2B, one project will communicate with another project by using REST API, distributed application. Now make my trip should be developed by using only Java. Make my trip can be developed by using any technology. Make my trip should be developed by using only Java, or make my trip can be developed by using any technology. Here guys, I will show you make my trip development by using Java and make my trip development by using Angular. Both I will show you. So I told you in the initial classes, two scenarios. What are the two scenarios? One company application will access another company application. That is called B2B communication. Another scenario, front-end part will be developed by Angular or React. Back-end part will be developed by REST API. So I will talk about both scenarios. First, I will develop Make My Trip application by using Java. So from our Java application, we will access the IRCTC API. So later, I will develop Make My Trip application by using Angular. From the Angular, I will show how to access REST API. So Java application can access another Java application. Python application can access Java. .NET application can access Java. PHP can access our Java. Angular can access REST API. React.js can access our REST API. So now are you able to understand these two scenarios? One company project can access another company project, B2B. In our company, our project is microservices project. Backend REST API is available, front-end Angular. Angular application should access my backend REST API. Make My Trip should access IRCTC REST API. Scenario 1 and scenario 2. I hope today you got some more clarity on distributed applications development. Today you got some more clarity on the distributed applications development. Better than last week, right? Yeah, slowly. You will become very good microservices developer. Because these RESTful services, microservices, cloud deployments, one application to another application. So this is my favorite subject, guys. REST APIs is my favorite subject because it is very interesting because one project will access another project. That's where the interesting concept is there. Earlier, we created one class and we access one class method in the another class by creating the object. That is very routine work, right? Creating one Java class and calling another Java class method by creating the object. But today, one project we are accessing from another project. The interesting is that if you like the technology, then you will enjoy these sessions. Yeah. So someone is asking what is FIAN client? So FIAN client, it is used for inter-microservice communication. If I explain that in the single line, you may not be able to understand. N number of questions will come. So give me another 1 week of time. I will explain what is FIAN client also. So today I'm not talking anything about FIAN client because if I give single line answer, then from that single line, you will get some other doubts. So let's leave it for now. In future, we are going to understand what is FIAN client. So tomorrow, what we need to do? Guys, tomorrow, what we need to do? What is our agenda for tomorrow? We need to develop our client application. Make My Trip application we need to develop. Consumer we need to develop. Provider is already ready. Provider is already ready, available in the public cloud. Now we need to understand the client development. Okay. First, I will develop client with Java. Second, I will develop client with the Angular. Angular integrations we will see at the end of the course. How to integrate Spring Boot with Angular and all that stuff. So yesterday one class is also happened, Spring Boot with Angular integration. Did you guys attended that? I shared that link also in our group. Spring Boot with Angular integration. Yesterday one workshop we conducted for 3 hours. Spring Boot with Angular integration. Yes. Okay, I will also show you how Spring Boot application can be integrated with the Angular project. First, I will develop the client application and I will show you the communication between the client application and provider application. Yep. So with this, I'm stopping for today. Any questions, anybody, you can ask. Tomorrow, we will see how to develop the client application.
Sir, not related to this. Can I ask a question, sir? Not related to this. After this course, I think till April end it will go off, no, sir? Almost.
Yes, sir. Till April end it will go.
After that, in the same slot, what is your plan, sir? Do you have any plan? What is the next course you are going to start in this slot?
No idea, sir, as of now.
Okay, sir. Because actually, if at all you start some DevOps or real-time project.
Yeah, I'm also thinking to go with the DevOps. We'll see that.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you, sir.
Harrier, full stack, sir? Full stack which?
Full stack.
Sir, when will you start DevOps with AWS, sir?
My DevOps with AWS will start in the April end. So if our batch is completed, then only it will come.
The project Angular React.
Angular React. I'm not going to take that, guys. So because my expertise is complete backend, DevOps and cloud. I'm not that much good in the front end part. But HTML, CSS, I'm not that much good in that area. That's why I know Angular. I'm using Angular in my project, but I'm not a complete Angular developer. Whatever Angular is required for the Java developers, that much I know. I'm not good with complete Angular projects.
Sir, please plan for AWS DevOps course, sir, if possible.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Sir, what is the difference between SOAP API and REST API, sir?
Sorry?
SOAP API and REST API. How to develop SOAP API?
That I will explain one example for the SOAP also, guys. Now we are not talking about the SOAP. Completely we are talking on the REST because SOAP is already outdated in the market.
Sir, how about project development, sir?
This course is not related to project development, sir. This is Spring Boot microservices, right? Project is separate batch.
When you will start that, sir? You had plans starting it in March.
I will update you. That's recently one batch started at 9:30 a.m. New batch schedule is not yet finalized. I will update you on that. Okay.
Hello. Sir, I started the project using WAR. Can I move to jar?
You need to repackage that. In the Spring Boot, there will be a packaging type. In that packaging type, you can change that. Okay.
Sir, this course AWS will
Goal is
be covered,
available,
right?
sir, in a project. You can run project time. So many Maven goal is available. What is the use of this Maven goals?
Maven goals are used for build process, sir. Clean goal, delete the target directory. Compile goal will compile the project. Test goal will execute the test cases. Package goal will package your application as a jar file or WAR file. Maven tool, you have to learn for that. Okay.
Hello.
Sir, in my project, there is like multiple files they have made, like beans, business, config, constant, helper. So can you like explain the structure, like how should we generally make the project, the structure of the project?
Sure. We are going to develop one mini project by using microservices. At that time, you will get that clarity. Okay. Now we are understanding the concepts now. Once all our syllabus topics are completed, I will develop one small mini project. In that mini project, I will explain you that.
Okay. And sir, is there any video you have made on GraphQL?
No, sir. I did not do that.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
And Swagger both are the same, right, sir? We can use it's the same function, both of them. We can use any of them, right?
Yes, any of them we can use.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Hi.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Hi. Tell me.
Hi, sir. Sir, have you covered JUnit also?
I have not covered. I will explain one example with that.
Okay.
At the end. First, we need to complete our RESTful services. Now we are doing the client development, right? Once the client development is completed, we will understand security part for that. Then cloud, microservices topics we have to learn. At the end, I will write a JUnit also for our REST API.
Okay.
Yes, sir. That would be great. JUnit is very important.
Hi, sir.
Yeah. Hi.
Sir, please make sir Spring Boot sir interview questions, sir.
Interview questions also will give that, sir.
Spring Boot and microservices.
Yeah. We will share that. Okay.
Also, sir, can you please explain HITA's principle frequently in this question?
HETIO's principle. Yeah, I did not cover the REST principles as of now.
Okay.
I will explain all the REST principles. I will explain what is HETIO's also.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yep. Hi.
In my project, we are calling REST API using proxy server, sir.
Okay. That in the real time. So
Okay.
directly, our application cannot access third-party applications directly. In the company, there will be a proxy server and there will be a concept called IP whitelisting. A number of security gates will be available in the company if you want to send any request from your company project to other company project. Okay. IP whitelisting concepts will be there. Networking team is IP whitelisting concept will be available. Networking team is going to take care of IP whitelisting. I will tell you what is IP whitelisting also.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi. Someone is asking, sir, what is your package? Why you need my package, man?
Hello, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Please tell us.
Hello, sir.
Why?
Hello.
Yes, sir. Tell me.
Sir, can you retrieve the JPC files and Excel files from the database into the front end side?
Can you come again?
Can we display the image files and Excel files, whatever we have in database, in the front end side?
We need to download that. So we need to read from the Java. From the Java, we need to send it to the front end. Excel export, PDF export functionalities.
Yes, sir. Actually, we are downloading that part, sir. Actually, my task is we have to display that file, sir. Is there any possibility?
Yeah, we can do that. You just Google how to export, how to send Excel file from database to UI. So you need to write some code. Basically, directly it will not come. You need to write the Java code. You need to give the link in the front end. When you click that link in the front end, that file should be downloaded. Okay.
Yes.
So basically, you need to read that data from the backend, and you need to create an Excel file in your application. You need to send that Excel file to front end.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, it's a repeated question. Sorry to ask the same thing. Can you please share the freelancing website you said?
Sir, I forgot it. So,
yeah.
1 minute. I forgot the name of that. PU something will be there, man. I will send you that, sir. I forgot it. Basically, I saved it somewhere. I will send you.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
Fine, guys. Good. Thank you. We'll meet tomorrow. So please complete your API development if you have not done. Tomorrow we'll see client development. Thank you, guys.